You know the saying, real recognizes real? Well, let's just say Tony Grossi picked the wrong week to be fake. Because not only did Shedeur Sanders clap back in full force after yet another tired, lazy critique from the press, Denzel Washington himself stepped into the ring. And when Denzel, the man with more Oscars than Grossi's good takes, starts dragging your name to the mud for being reckless with your words, yeah, it's not going to be a great Monday for you. So let's set the stage. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Shedeur Sanders, fresh off one of the best performances of his season, lights out, no notes, nothing but dimes and dominance, walks into the post-game presser like he's got a Rolex on each wrist. He didn't this time, but spiritually, absolutely. And waiting for him, Tony Grossi, Cleveland media veteran, serial doubter, basically the guy in the press room who treats every young quarterback like they owe him rent money. Grossi had been running his mouth all week, insinuating that Shedeur was overhyped, questioning his injury recovery, calling his leadership manufactured. He even called Shedeur's recent highlight reel PR fluff. PR fluff. The man had the nerve to say that a rookie QB putting up stats, commanding an offense, and winning games was just a branding move. Shedeur heard it all. So when that game clock hit 0 and the mic came on, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't snap. He just looked directly at Grossi mid-question and said, "You keep talking like you've been there, but you haven't. You don't know what it takes. You never put on pads, never took a hit, never had a locker room on your back. So don't question mine." A full-on mic drop moment, without even dropping the mic. You could feel the energy in the room shift. And somewhere in the background, Denzel Washington was watching. And he wasn't just nodding, he was fired up. Because later that week, during a red carpet interview, yes, red carpet, Denzel got asked about Shedeur. They expected a quick comment, maybe a, "he's doing well." What they got was a sermon. Denzel didn't hold back. He launched straight into the double standard, how young black athletes like Shedeur are constantly being dissected, minimized, and questioned by media figures who have never stepped foot on a field. He said, "You got grown men out here critiquing a 21-year-old like he owes them something, like they could ever do what he's doing. These kids are getting judged by people who never played the game, never even tried, but they act like they know better." And when the interviewer tried to pivot, Denzel doubled down. You want to criticize someone? Get in the gym with him. Go run drills. Study tape at 3 a.m. in the cold. Until then, go watch one of my movies and keep quiet. Iconic, because only Denzel could casually remind you that your football opinion doesn't matter and promote his latest film in the same sentence. But he wasn't done. Later, during a panel, Denzel called out the broader issue, the way sports media thrives on tearing people down, especially young players trying to build something, especially players like Shedeur, who come in with swagger, family legacy, and actual skill to back it up. Denzel said, "We love watching the rise, but we live for fall. And some of these reporters, they don't just report, they dig the holes." And when he was asked about Tony Grossi by name, all Denzel said was, "Never heard of her. Savage." Look, when you got Denzel Washington, literal cinematic royalty, going out his way to defend a rookie quarterback, that's not just support. That's legacy protecting legacy. Because Denzel's not just speaking as a fan. He's a father. He's a black man. He's someone who knows exactly what it's like to have your every move picked apart by people who could never walk in your shoes. And the message he sent that week? Crystal clear. Respect has to be earned and given, but here's where it gets really interesting. That confrontation with Grossi, that wasn't just about football. It wasn't just a spicy soundbite. It was a statement. Shedeur didn't rant. He didn't throw chairs. He didn't storm off. He handled it with composure, clarity, and more professionalism than the man trying to bait him. And that shook people. Because let's be honest, media figures like Grossi are counting on athletes to lose it. They poke, they prod, they twist words. Then they sit back and act shocked when someone claps back. But Shedeur refused to give him that show. Instead, he turned the table. And suddenly, Grossi was the one squirming, looking defensive, backpedaling on his own takes. Even other journalists started whispering about how Grossi might have gone too far. You know it's bad when your own peers won't defend you. Meanwhile, Shedeur walked out of that press conference with even more respect than he had going in. And that's the power of controlling your own story. Because in that moment, Shedeur showed everyone watching, teammates, critics, fans, kids, that you can defend yourself without stooping low. You can clap back with truth and still hold your head high. And when Denzel chimed in later, it wasn't just support, it was confirmation. Confirmation that Shedeur wasn't just reacting to petty criticism. He was calling out a system that too often weaponizes analysis to tear down confidence. You want to know what happened next? Grossi tried to save face. Put out a lukewarm statement about respecting all players. Said he welcomes dialogue. The usual corporate fluff. But the damage was done. Twitter was not having it. Hashtag Team Shedeur started trending. Not literally, but you know the vibe. Old clips resurfaced of Grossi dogging other players in the past. His credibility? Shaky. His coverage? Under a microscope. Meanwhile, Shedeur got invited to the shop, shouted out by LeBron, and casually posted a clip of him working out with the caption, "Pressure makes diamonds." And look, we're not saying Denzel Washington made him bulletproof overnight, but let's be real, it didn't hurt. This whole saga reminded everyone watching that criticism isn't neutral. There's a difference between holding someone accountable and trying to control their narrative. And when that narrative gets weaponized, when it becomes less about the game and more about ego, bias, or insecurity, that's when legends step in, which is exactly what Denzel did. So to all the Tony Grossis out there, to the critics who think taking shots from the cheap seats makes them insightful, here's a little advice from Denzel and Shedeur's playbook. If you've never played the game, if you've never taken a hit, if you've never had to perform with the world watching, maybe you shouldn't be the loudest voice in the room. And to the athletes grinding every day, hearing the noise, dealing with the doubt, let this be your reminder. You don't need everyone to believe in you. You just need to believe enough to prove them wrong. The rest, the Grossis of the world, they're just background noise in your highlight reel. Now let me know what you think. Was Shedeur right to call him out? And how iconic was Denzel for putting sports media on blast? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more celebrity chaos, sports drama, and media moments that remind us who's really in charge. Because the truth? Sometimes the loudest critics just need a little Hollywood reality check. And here's the part that really made heads spin. It wasn't just that Denzel Washington said what everyone else was thinking. It's that he said it with that signature calm, commanding presence that makes even the boldest critics shrink back into their chairs. Because when Denzel speaks, it's not just a quote, it's a cultural moment. It hits different. It sticks. And in this case, it lit a fire under a conversation that's been quietly simmering in the background of every locker room, every post-game press conference, every studio roundtable that devolves into yelling over stats. When did we let sports media become the story? Because if we're keeping it real, this wasn't just about Tony Grossi. He's not the first, and he won't be the last. The problem is structural. The blueprint has changed. We live in an era where analysts chase virality, not accuracy. Where it's more important to go viral with a hot take than to offer an informed opinion. Where tearing down a young athlete is just another Monday segment. And Shedeur? He became the latest target because he dares to have presence. He dresses how he wants, talks with confidence, posts like he's already built the empire. So of course that rubs certain people the wrong way, because it doesn't fit the mold. The mold they want athletes to follow, grateful, humble, silent until proven useful. That old school, play your role mindset that leaves no room for personality unless you've got rings on your fingers. But Shedeur doesn't play that game. He came in fully formed, media ready, culturally aware, legacy protected. And that scares people who made their careers off poking holes in underdogs trying to figure it out. Denzel saw that from a mile away. He saw the pattern. Build them up just to break them down. And he wasn't having it. Not this time. Not with this kid. Because Shedeur's not just playing for himself. He's playing with generational weight. He's not just another rookie quarterback. He's a Sanders, and not in the shadow of Dion, in partnership with him. That's what makes this whole situation so uncomfortable for critics like Grossi, because Shedeur doesn't need their approval. He doesn't need their validation. He's walking into press rooms with more cultural capital than the entire front row of sports media combined. And that makes certain people nervous. Because if Shedeur can bypass the gatekeepers, if he can become the main event without their permission, what does that say about their relevance? It says the era of the untouchable sports critic might just be over. And it's about time. Because for years, athletes have had to sit through disrespect disguised as honest analysis. We've seen young stars get labeled lazy, arrogant, overpaid, all while their critics cash checks for recycling talking points they wrote in 2007. Denzel's call-out wasn't just about Shedeur. It was about respecting the grind, especially when the grind doesn't fit your comfort zone. It was about reminding people that just because you've got a microphone doesn't mean you've got insight. And just because someone's confident doesn't mean they're cocky. Let's be honest, Shedeur's confidence gets framed very differently depending on who's holding the mic. If this were a kid named Chad from a Big Ten school with a buzz cut and a playbook in hand, we'd be calling him a field general. But because it's Shedeur, with the chain and the aura and the unapologetic style, it becomes too flashy, too full of himself. Needs to prove he can handle adversity. And yet he's done exactly that, over and over. From high school phenom to Colorado media circus to the NFL draft's most talked about storyline, Shedeur has handled pressure like it's part of his warm-up routine. Critics call him a product of hype. Fans call him the future. And Denzel, he sees what's really going on. He sees the double standard, the coded language, the same tired cycle repeating with a new name. So when he said, "Go watch one of my movies and stop talking," it wasn't just a flex. It was a polite way of saying, you're not qualified to judge this man. And here's where it gets poetic. The same week Denzel gave that speech, Shedeur dropped another gem. Not in a press conference, not in an interview, but on his own terms. He posted a training video. No music, no voiceover, just grind, representative sweat, silence, captioned, "I don't explain, I execute." That's it. Didn't name Grossi, didn't tag anyone, didn't throw shade. Just action, proof, presence. And that's the playbook Denzel was defending. You don't win the battle by screaming into microphones. You win by controlling your space and letting the scoreboard speak. That's why this story isn't just about a media spat. It's about a shift in power. It's about athletes owning their narratives and letting the critics flail in the wind. It's about real legends stepping up to shield the next generation from the same recycled nonsense they fought through. And it's about drawing a line in the sand. Because as long as guys like Tony Grossi are out here trying to hijack the conversation, we're going to need voices like Denzel to remind the world what actual credibility sounds like. So here's the real takeaway from all this. If you're going to criticize Shedeur Sanders, you better come correct. You better have real insight. You better be speaking from experience, not just throwing darts at a target who shines brighter than you ever will. Because this new era of athletes, they don't need you to tell their story. They've already got the platform, the fan base, the brand, and, let's be honest, the receipts. And if you're not adding something valuable, then maybe, just maybe, you should take Denzel's advice and go watch Training Day. Now tell me what you think. Did Denzel go too far? Or was he saying what needed to be said? And has the era of the unchecked critic finally come to an end? Drop your thoughts below and make sure you're subscribed, because this drama isn't over. Not by a long shot. We got more stories, more shakeups, and more legendary comebacks ahead. Because in this new world, the athletes run the show. And the critics? They're just fighting for a seat in the audience. And here's the part no one in sports media wants to admit. Even the ones pretending to stay neutral. This wasn't a Shedeur Sanders story. It was a reckoning. For years, the balance of power sat comfortably in the hands of pundits, analysts, columnists, the self-anointed gatekeepers of what's considered legit in sports. They dictated who got praised and who got picked apart. They decided which athletes were the real deal and which ones were cocky, raw, too emotional. And most of the time, those lines followed a very familiar pattern. But Shedeur flipped that, not by asking for permission, not by begging to be understood, by simply showing up, speaking when he wanted to, dominating on the field, and letting the outside noise circle him like flies that would never land. But the moment Denzel stepped in, it was over for the old playbook. Because when an icon like that backs you publicly, in front of cameras, with that surgical Denzel precision, it's not just support, it's validation. It's legacy endorsing legacy. And it sent one very clear message. You can't bully your way to credibility anymore. Not when athletes are more media savvy than the people covering them. Not when they've got millions of followers, brand deals, and global platforms without ever needing a flattering write-up in your column. And definitely not when someone like Denzel Washington is watching from the sidelines, ready to hit you with a monologue that cuts deeper than any tweet thread. Let's be real. This wasn't even about Shedeur's play at this point. He already showed he could perform, already proved he belonged. The stats were there. The leadership was there. The poise? Elite. What Tony Grossi and critics like him were reacting to wasn't a lack of performance. It was a lack of submission. Shedeur didn't play the game, the media game. He didn't play up to them. Didn't give them access just for praise. Didn't do the ah shucks routine that some critics expect from young athletes, especially the ones who look like him. And for people like Grossi, that's threatening, because they're used to being able to write a narrative that sticks, used to being the loudest voice in the room, used to being the final word. But now, athletes have louder microphones, wider audiences, stronger influence, and when the criticism comes, they can respond directly to millions without needing a middleman. Shedeur doesn't need Grossi. He never did. What's more, he understands that the second you stop letting critics define you, they lose power. And that scares the hell out of them. That's why Grossi kept going after him. Not because Shedeur was underperforming, but because he wouldn't bend, wouldn't shrink, wouldn't ask for approval. So when Shedeur confronted him, face to face, with calm precision and total confidence, it wasn't just clapback energy. It was a reset, a moment that said, this is your last warning. Get it right or get left behind. And here's what's wild. This wasn't even Shedeur's most emotional moment. He didn't yell, didn't storm off, didn't even crack. He just stood his ground. And somehow, that hit harder than anything he could have screamed. The media world noticed. Players noticed. Other rookies noticed. That's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. The ripple effect. You better believe other young players watched that clip and took notes. They saw that you can speak up and stay composed. That defending your name doesn't make you dramatic. It makes you intentional. That if you do the work and back it up with results, you don't have to accept disrespect, no matter who's holding the mic. And on the flip side, media outlets started squirming. They saw what happened to Grossi, how quickly he went from smug commentator to Twitter chew toy, how fast the tables turned when fans started pulling up his receipts, how quiet the rest of the press room got after Shedeur's clapback. Because suddenly, everyone realized, you might be next. If you're careless with your words, if you come for someone just for the sake of engagement, if you use critique as a disguise for bitterness, you could be the next one trending, for all the wrong reasons. And then, of course, came the performative backpedaling. Other analysts tried to save face. Maybe we were too harsh. Shedeur's got a good head on his shoulders. He handled that really well. Oh, now he's got a good head on his shoulders? It's always the same dance. Trash someone while they're climbing. Celebrate them when they don't flinch. Then pretend you were supportive all along. But fans aren't dumb. They saw through it, and they've already picked their side. Shedeur's not just respected now, he's protected. There's a kind of cultural force field around him. Not because he's perfect, not because he's beyond critique, but because he's proven he can handle pressure without folding, without flailing, and without losing himself. He's not asking to be above criticism. He's just asking to be treated fairly. To not be reduced to flashy or entitled, because he shows up in diamonds and doesn't apologize for knowing his worth. That's not arrogance. That's clarity. And clarity? That's the real threat. Because clarity exposes projection. It reveals the fact that most of these so-called analysts aren't evaluating performance. They're evaluating personality. They're uncomfortable with anything they can't control. And Shedeur can't be controlled. So now what? Tony Grossi's credibility is toast. Denzel's monologue is living rent-free in the heads of every tired pundit who thinks clout is a substitute for class. And Shedeur? He's still working, still grinding, still winning, no matter what the media says. Because what they didn't realize is that while they were busy trying to drag him down, he was building something bigger. A playbook for how to handle heat with grace. A blueprint for future rookies. A legacy that doesn't require permission. And if Denzel Washington's behind you, trust, your story is already cinema. So drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this media takedown long overdue? And how do you see Shedeur rewriting the rules for future athletes? Hit subscribe if you're here for more cultural mic drops, messy media moments, and the legends who refuse to be talked down to. Because if the saga proved anything, the era of unchecked criticism is over, and the future belongs to the ones who don't flinch.